Yeah, hello and welcome to another episode of the Socially Numb podcast. Today we got some exciting news. We bring in the new year, as yesterday was the first day of 2017. And with that, we are going to go ahead and begin to expand our reach and our show. Up until this point, we have been using the Socially Numb podcast to talk about different topics. The idea was that it would be an all-in-one variety show. And up to this point, it was pretty cool. It worked out like that. We tried different things. This was pretty much the test show for some ideas that I've had. And at the beginning, I spun off a parenting show called Dad Strength, which is one episode ahead because they used to launch on the same day. We spread it out. Socially Numb hosted the podcast. And now it's going to go ahead and break off into its own site. And we're doing that because of some of the topics. We're trying to make it so that each sub-site is more focused. And all of these sites are owned by Leahy Media. And with me being your host, I also run Leahy Media. So I want to get out different information for different interests and hobbies that I've had. And I currently have. And some of those topics and hobbies are a little bit easier to splice apart because they attract different fans. And I don't want to alienate certain fans, and it's hard to do an all-in-one site because based on different contributors and other people that I can get involved, I don't want to start to fracture off and forget about some of those other topics. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to anyone who visits the site, any of the fans that we may have, any of the listeners. And so today, we're going to go ahead and finally split off sports. Now, you may have known that when we started the variety show, we were breaking down different topics, and it started off, I would try to cover whatever was trending in social media, and then I would talk about a predetermined set of topics. I would go ahead and start with movies, videos, TV shows, then we'd go through video games, sports, technology, parenting, I think was always split. I don't know. But that was the idea behind the site and the Socially Numb podcast, trying to get all social topics in one area. And while the theory was good in the planning stage, it just didn't work out because more and more on the podcast, I was dedicating time to sports or just gaming and tech. And more of the gaming and tech side of things is where Socially Numb, it's what it was founded for and where I wanted to go with the brand, with the site, with the podcast. And I didn't want to split off the other segment of the show and just have like sports take over certain weekends or gaming take over other weekends, because I didn't want it to be one of those clickbait sites where I was just throwing out fluff content trying to get topics covered. And that's where it felt like it was going. I've had the idea to break it off for a while now. I mentioned it in Dad Strength, on the Dad Strength podcast, I believe. I don't think I mentioned it on this podcast yet, but the idea behind it was that I could break off the sports part, much like I did the parenting, take culture, because some of the culture things that I want to cover would be like tailgating, drinking, outdoor festivities, sort of more along the lines of what we had talked about on the sports section of Socially Numb. And trying to get guests on. I know I had one so far, Matty B. He called in and he had some ideas, and I had some other contributors reach out to try to expand, But mostly everyone that did that were involved in the sports side of things. And so to help that side grow, I didn't want to hold it back. I didn't want to hold Socially Numb hostage where I abandon the tech talk and the gaming talk. Because there are some things that I still want to do. I've been looking at trying to get streaming up. I'm not in a hurry to do that because I'm moving along the lines of adding a video component to the show. And that was another one of my intentions that I always had in the back of my mind. And it's reached the point where it's going to start. So with the new year, it's been, a handful of months. I started in September. So about 3 or 4 months ago, I started this podcast. And I went ahead and expanded it at a pretty good rate. And I'm happy where it's gone. I've seen that we've got some reach in other countries outside of the United States. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty killer. And I didn't want to stop just right there. Now, with that and with this change, some of the other things that I've had going with Socially Numb, they're going to go ahead and splinter off. And so there are going to be some major changes to the site and how it is laid out and everything. So right now, I had the menu, and it used to have tabs for all different type of topics. And then I found that I was gearing towards writing only for one or two, mainly sports and some tech sprinkled in, but mainly gaming was the other one. So I had sports and gaming as my forefront, two topics that I had prepared writings for, that I had content for on the podcast, and more as I was getting the podcast up and running. I also had to get everything listed. I've still been spot checking because I'm running with everything at once. So it's not like I had the site ready to go and then the site launched and then the podcast launched. I started with the podcast. In the meantime, I've been working on getting the site up. I have articles from before the previous site where it was just writing before the podcast. And I've been going through, I had them in database format. And so there are other characters and things injected. So I have to go through, cut those out, proofread it. I've been using like a regex to try to go ahead and match filters and things that I've seen, patterns. But then I have to look through and see, okay, what was my final version? What was the last revision? Is the revision necessary? Is it something to do with comments? So I went ahead and have been trying to get all of that up and running. So the goal for 2017 with the new year, and I hate New Year's resolutions because they almost always fail. But right now for me, it's going to be to get all the content up on its respected sites. So where I was going and splintering off and having trouble getting the Dad Strength podcast portion of the site on Socially Numb in its own little niche. And then if I was going to add a sports portion to that site, it didn't make sense, and it's too hard for me to try to force different brands and everything, tie everything together. It's just too hard. It doesn't make sense. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and begin the process of relaunching some of the other content, moving some of the subscription stuff that I've had for both podcasts, Dad Strength and Socially Numb, and prepare to launch the third sports-centered podcast. How will it affect Socially Numb? Not really sure. As of right now, not very much. The only difference is going to be the main navigation. I'm going to go ahead and remove the parenting tab. That's gone. I don't know if I still have gaming on there. Culture might be gone too. I think that might carry over with the sports to the new site. And I might talk a little bit about sports on this podcast, but the main focus is going to go ahead and become gaming and tech. And I don't want to just say sports because this podcast will cover esports. It's blossoming into its own genre of sports, and that's going to be covered here on Socially Numb. Some of the other things that I'm still going to get into is I'm going to try to bring back trending topics, talk about those, more of a one-man show type deal. get it out there, cover different things, areas of my expertise, and other things that I have been testing out, and what I see in my everyday work. Now, with the format of the show, up until this point, I had started with an hour's worth of content. And as you can imagine, it was pretty easy at first because I was bringing in trends. Then I had an allotted time, 5 to 10 minutes for a bunch of other topics. And what I did was I found myself rumbling on, getting into more detail for some of the hotter topics. Think gaming when Pokemon Go came out. I was all over that. It was making me mad. I was testing out the game, trying to bring back memories of growing up and experiencing that all over. And that went ahead and had me eliminate some of the topics. Like when you're out and about, you don't have time to watch television. And I don't want to be one of those sites, and you've all seen them, where they start to mail in content just because they know, like, hey, so-and-so television show's hot, write an article on it. I don't know too much about it. I don't have time to watch it. I'm going to read some highlights, watch some trailers and some clips on YouTube. I'll look for any controversial moments, and boom, filter out some type of article. But I'm not for that. I'd rather sit down, and if it's something that I like, I'll go ahead and cover it, get into detail. But outside of that, no, I'm not going to fake the content. And that goes along with some of the other areas. So like movies and TV shows were the first two that got cut on the podcast because I just didn't have time every week to watch a new television show. There wasn't any that kept my interest that I was watching, like, oh man, this premieres this week. With a lot of sports stuff going on, football in the fall especially, that was what I mainly watched. Now as playoffs start here and the college bowl season wraps up, yeah, I'll probably get into more television show and movies, and you'll see that reflected in the podcast itself. But back when this launched, no, I didn't have time to do that every day. I even toyed around with like trying to read a book a day. I like to read on my breaks, but then I was reading different parenting stuff, topics to get ready for the podcast, and researching some trends, and I didn't have a consistent book. It slowed down my reading pace immensely, so that was cut. And what was the other one? Oh, music. So I got hit with a heavy barrage of like bands that I liked, having new albums released last year in the fall, and even last year as a whole. Megadeth had an album, Anthrax, Slayer, I believe. Theirs might have came out 2 years ago. Iron Maiden's came out 2 years ago already now. And then Metallica dropped one with Testament and Vader. So there was a lot of music that I could have covered, but that was a once in a while thing. Like Metallica doesn't put out albums regularly at all. It's like years apart, almost decades between albums. So it's not something that I could sustain talking about the same music over and over. I could have broke down a song. I started to get into that for this site, breaking down the Metallica videos. I'm not sure if that's going to live on this site or if I'm going to go ahead and put it somewhere else. I do like breaking down some of that. I think Socially Numb is a good place to put it, just because we have some of the, like, it was breaking down videos, so that's cool, like media type stuff. So I'm not sure. I might add it back in. So you might see with the removal of sports, some of those other topics creep back into the site. Now it's not going to be anywhere near consistent. Like I can't have an article every week written by myself for one of those. Maybe if I pick up the pace for a bit, yeah, that might work out. But right now, it's going to slow up a bit. I want to get some more features of the site ironed out and get everything tested before I continue to make some more improvements and changes. So right now, the next thing on the sites were comments. I had a comment system set up using Discuss. It was another site commenting format. But I noticed that people were visiting the articles. No one was commenting, maybe because the articles weren't interesting enough. Maybe it's something on my end. Or maybe it was the nuisance of having to go ahead and register for a Discuss site. I don't know. And so comments, I think, are currently down because I'm going to begin to transition, and I think I'm going to try to incorporate Facebook contents. Now, my site is hosted using Jekyll, which is a static HTML site generator, and that's so that the site can load amazingly fast. I don't have a lot of plugins. I don't have a lot of the JavaScript ad-based things that you see on other sites. Yeah, I might start to add that in. It's been a struggle trying to think of how I want to incorporate that, but it will help the show grow if I add it. I don't know. I don't want to go too crazy with it, but that's one thing that slows it down. The commenting system would also slow it down, but I didn't want to have to deal with spam. I could have went with some other lightweight solution where it was like people comment and I just have to have like some CAPTCHA, but I didn't have to worry about that. I'd rather have someone have to go through, if they want to spam or bot me, have to go through the trouble of creating an account on Discuss or signing in with Facebook or Google Plus or whatever. So now I think I'm going to switch directly to Facebook. And the reason I did that, or I decided that, was because just based on how many people use Facebook, I know other giant sites like ESPN use the Facebook comments. I think it's still a thing. If they ever get rid of it, I might have to go with something else. And I think it works directly with Jekyll. I just have to go ahead and create the snippet, add it in, and replace the Discuss one. So that's something I'm going to go ahead and roll out. I did have a Facebook page set up for Socially Numb, but traffic was almost non-existent. Where I get most of the traffic for this site currently from Reddit or from Twitter, I put the same content. Actually, I didn't put any of the content on Reddit. I don't know who shared it there, but I had a dummy account. Well, it was just a blank account that I set up. I was gonna try to create a community on Reddit, but I didn't have enough karma because I've never used it. So I don't know if that's how people checked it, but a good bit of traffic came from Reddit. So I'd imagine someone shared something that I posted. And then on Twitter, which Twitter, I did have a Socially Numb account. And I found myself, and this goes back to like the podcast, and trying to like do everything with one. Most of my tweets were sports related. And I felt bad about that because I'm trying to get everything culture-wise, tech-wise, and I found out that I wasn't doing that, conveying that across my account and portraying Socially Numb as what it was supposed to be. So I had people going into the site. They weren't bouncing, but they're leading from Twitter, thinking, hey, maybe this is a sports site. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But I went ahead and I want to clear that up. So the Twitter for Socially Numb has now been changed to our sports site. Now the name of the sports site, it's official. It is going to be Southbound Sports, and it's going to go ahead and talk about all of the major sports, using stats like I've been doing, trying to break down, get behind the scenes, look at the statistics, get away from like these hot takes that you see in the media where people are just trying to rile up some type of conversation to get clicks. Yeah, maybe some of the stats show that. I might have a different view on things, different perspective, but I'm going to put it out there. I'm still going to go ahead and lead. I'm not sure where I'm going to host the Major League Baseball payrolls. I might have shared something on Facebook before, but I'm not sure. The page is gone, so I'm pretty sure all of the comments and stuff were gone that I shared. So I'm going to get that back up whenever I move. So if you were into the sports section of the show, check out Southbound Sports. It's a new site. The site's probably not going to be active 100% whenever this comes up. It takes a while for the site to get set up in the internet, and it just went live today. So I doubt it's live with content. It's probably just a placeholder or dummy content. I'll be filling that out as fast as possible, trying to get everything caught up and running smoothly. So I recommend, if you were into the sports section of the show, keep listening to this one. If you like some of the banter I did, Southbound Sports is going to be a little bit of a different take and a different vibe, because it's hard to cover sports on a podcast. if someone stumbles upon this podcast and they just subscribe and they start at the very beginning, they're going to hear the trends that I did before, and you hear about it, and they might remember it. So trending topics, you might know. And if you listen to it ahead or maybe years later, you're going to know like, oh, I might remember that. So like if I said, like when I was growing up, they had those Tamagotchi pets, the little pets that came on a keychain that you had to feed and keep alive. If I talked about those as a trend, years later, someone might find that podcast, listen to it, and laugh because they were like, hey, yeah, I was into that. I remember some of the other ones, like I think I talked about a guy getting attacked by a grizzly. Someone could find that podcast, listen to it, and it's still kind of fresh because I didn't really talk about it in the way that it was shaping society. It was something that happened. But if someone listens to that podcast, they can go back, find that video, see what I was talking about, and it's still pretty current. And I think that's how podcasts should be. If I ended up doing like some type of interviews, which is what I'm leaning towards doing, trying to get some unknown people on the podcast just to try to get some outside exposure for different people. I've been looking at getting some that use technology to their advantage. That's one thing that I want to do. I think that's something that is pretty interesting and you don't hear a lot about. And so that's something that I want to do on this podcast. I could rant about things that make them mad because I've talked about, at least I think I have, about some technology that's very frustrating, like people wearing headphones in public, walking into you, not paying attention. Yeah, that kind of stuff's annoying. Technology makes life much easier, but it also creates hassles for others because people, they don't know what's going on. They don't pay attention in their own life. So that's a whole nother thing. Probably go digging into that. I'll still break down gaming. I haven't gamed a bunch because it's been the holidays. And holidays are usually a time for families. So that's what I've been doing. And with that, you don't have time to like sit around and get into like a spout of gaming all alone time. Yeah, I use gaming to unwind. So if I've been like at work doing some work related things that have been taking up a lot of time, yeah, gaming, then I use that as an unwind. And then as I like play games like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, I'll want to break that down because that's something that frustrated me. As a free game, you can't really complain, but as a game that people are reviewing super high, that's not something that's realistic. So it's just something that I looked at that I'll probably bring back for this podcast and keep it going. So that's the kind of things you're going to find on the site. I did get rid of the Facebook page, like I said. Right now it's only, is there a Google Plus page maybe? And the SoundCloud, of course. So it's basically the Google Plus page is tied into the search engine stuff. And so I don't know if there's going to be, I have been looking at getting Bing set up. I don't know if anyone uses Bing. I know Yahoo got bought by Microsoft, so it might help with people who use Yahoo. I know a bunch of people that still use that, especially for fantasy sports and that type of deal. But I've been looking at getting just more exposure for the site itself. It's definitely going to stay up. The podcast is going to continue. I enjoy doing it. I always have. And with the spinoff now, I'll talk into a little bit about like Southbound Sports and where that's going. But Southbound Sports on the podcast, like I said, it's been tough to talk sports on a podcast. I've given some examples about how the content can be evergreen in technology and even trends. Going back to some topics I touched about, even if you went to like the ALS bucket challenge, it was something that everyone was doing. They put a video of themselves dumping ice on themselves, if you don't know what it is. So if I would rant about that and someone would stumble upon the podcast later on, they're going to hear it. They're going to know exactly what I was talking about. Hey, yeah, I remember that. That was stupid. People weren't even donating money. They were just doing it to get attention. And only because someone called them out in public and they were like, oh my God, I can't do that. People called me out and I didn't do it. I didn't have Facebook at the time. That was a work-related decision to bring that back. But anyway, That's something that people could talk about. And with sports, it's hard to do because sports goes ahead and it's a, hey, look at me now type medium. And an hour podcast a week, unless that's all I'm focused on and I'm getting it pushed out through like major media networks like ESPN or Fox Sports, it's not going to happen. So I'm taking a different approach, much like Dad Strength. So Dad Strength is a more focused podcast. It's only 15 minutes. You go in, there's a topic. I go on about it. Kind of boring. I'm going to spice that up too because I'm going to introduce video. And with Dad Strength then, there's going to be a video podcast that goes out on YouTube along with the actual audio content. So the content will be the same, delivered the same on Dad Strength. 15 minutes, I've been breaking down developmental charts, just telling you what to look for. Yeah, not the best on podcast topics, but that was the first podcast to go ahead and get my technical specs up to date, make sure that everything worked, and I wasn't having any issues. And I'm going to use Dad Strength to go to the forefront of video as well. So I'm going to set up a video, probably going to start breaking down children's toys, what to look for, putting those up on YouTube, and the audio from them are going to go ahead and be the podcast feed. Pretty cool. I enjoy doing them. I think the visual aspect, it gives someone else, if you want to see what I'm talking about, watch the YouTube. If you don't, keep listening to the podcast. I like the podcast because I can listen to it when I'm driving. I'm going to try to do a pretty good job explaining it. We'll see. It's something new that I'm going to try with Dad Strength. And with that, I moved it out of the Socially Numb website host. You used to have like a /parenting directory where I had all the parenting stuff. And then I also had Dad Strength. I'm going to have to get it changed over on all the podcast feeds. So that's going to be a little bit of a pain. I hope nothing goes down. I've been transferring the domains and everything, getting everything set up. And I'm also going to change the feed for Socially Numb. So you might lose that for a day or two. I'm going to take that and just host it on Leahy Media because that's who owns the podcast. And they're going to go ahead and get the feed under their control just in case, like down the road, if something happens, if I wanted to roll this out into its own thing, like another tech thing or whatever, and the show ended, it would still be alive. So no worries. If you stumbled upon it and liked it, the episodes would still be available, but I'm telling you, I'm going to keep doing it. I like talking tech and gaming. What I would like to do to expand it is to get some gaming streams going, but that's later on down the line, and I think I've mentioned that before. So how this works for Dad Strength is I've been doing it every Wednesday. That will probably change maybe to every Friday. I'm not 100% sure, but you go ahead and I put it out. 15 minutes I talk on a topic. Southbound Sports is going to be something similar. I'm putting out videos, but I think they're going to be a little bit more compact. 15 to 20 minutes. Some of the Dad Strengths run longer. When I do video, I'm sure it's going to be shorter. And with that, I want people to go ahead and have the option to watch the show or listen to it. Now with Southbound Sports, I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do it because I would like to give picks. It has to be relevant. And on podcasting, I manually have to go ahead and push the updates to my RSS feed. I'm not using WordPress or some other automatic generator. I would also have to encode, proof listen, and if I'm doing video, that might be a little extreme. So the podcast for that one, I'm not sure if there's going to be one. I'm pretty sure there's going to be. It will probably be a 20 minute. I would like to do picks, like for the hot games of the week, looking at gambling lines, seeing what to look for, even fantasy breakdowns. But I feel like I can go to the articles for that, just like I have on the other site. So I'm just going to move all of that, take it apart. Because some people, actually a lot of people, either like one or the other. They don't game and like sports. They either like sports or they like gaming. So now it's split. It's going to be a little bit different format for that show. Sort of like the 15-minute Dad Strength podcast with other little videos sprinkled throughout. the site and on YouTube or wherever I host them. And with that, I'm also bringing that type of innovation to Socially Numb. Now I have the YouTube channel up and running. It's been hosting the Dad Strength and the Socially Numb podcasts. Not a lot of views. I understand on YouTube. I get more listens on SoundCloud, but SoundCloud I have the free version, so it doesn't save the video plays. I had one that was pretty hot for Dad Strength, but I just had to take it off because I ran out of room, and I like to keep the most up-to-date one on there. I don't want to just save like my greatest hits or whatever, because that would make me get lazy, and then you might as well not even use that as a feed reader. If you want to subscribe to the podcast and get all the episodes, go to iTunes. I'm probably going to keep them all up. I don't know if I'd hit the range like crazy where I have to start paying tons of money for the feed to keep it alive. If so, I would just probably move it to a slower host than what I'm using, because that's all separate. And the feed would pretty much be the same. I would have to update the links. All that would mean is people who are subscribed, I think it forces you to download each episode again. I'm not sure why. At least on iTunes it does. Not sure about the others. But I'm going to go ahead and start to break down some tech deals. These are sort of extra tidbits that I'm bringing. They're not really podcast related. They're videos. They'll go on the site, do a little write-up for them, and you'll get the video for them. And this is just an extension of what I've been doing. In addition to the podcast, it's not going to be like Dad Strength, where the video is the podcast, so it's one or the other. It's an addition, or you don't have to watch it at all. But I would encourage you to check it out. I'm going to be doing some tinkering, like operating system-wise. The main thing that I'm looking at right now is a Raspberry Pi 3, and I had a Raspberry Pi 2, and if you don't know what it is a mini computer, 4 or 5 inches by 3 inches or 2 inches. I don't know. It's pretty small, and it has the built-in power supply jack, which uses like USB power, much like your phone charger would power it, I think in most cases. It has some USB jacks. This one has an audio jack built in, an Ethernet port. I actually didn't test the wireless. Well, I don't have a keyboard for it right now. So in the videos, I just did a breakdown, and I'm working on getting those up and running. But it has the Raspberry Pi itself, which is the computer. I also got their official 7-inch touchscreen. These are some of my Christmas gifts that I got, so it's pretty cool. I think I might have mentioned before, I don't know, on my Christmas rants. But the touchscreen is also powered by USB, and I got a case for it that it's like a wall mount. I think you can mount it to the desk too. I didn't mention it in the YouTube video. I'll have to try to remember to put that in the comments. But it's a little case that combines the touchscreen, and then in the back you can put the Raspberry Pi. It has a splitter for the USB power, so you can power it from one device. And I actually have a portable cell phone charger, and I use that cell phone charger to power both. So it powers the screen and the Raspberry Pi 3, which is very cool because then it's sort of a portable computer. You don't have to have extreme wall power. Now, I haven't tested or ran the gamut to see how much power it actually used and how long it would last with that. But if I'm out and about and I need to like do some work or type some stuff up, I can go ahead, put it out, and get some work done. If I'm going to play with it, do some robotics, which is the idea behind it. I do some robotics videos. I don't really want to do tutorials because tutorials are hard to keep up to date. So you can go ahead and put them on a site, then packages are updated, and your instructions are out of date. So I would leave tutorials to whoever or whatever company you're looking for one for. Like if you're looking for something to do with a Mac, they should do the tutorials. Yeah, I know they have some employees and they pay people to do other ones, but I'm not just going to throw them up for like my expertise. But I'll go ahead and break down different objects. If you want to dig one up, go ahead and do that. I might be able to put some links into it, but I don't like linking to products or other stores either, because then that gives a clear bias like, hey, use this store to order a part or not. but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that or not. I haven't put them up yet. So with the changes that have happened, it's bringing some improvements to Socially Numb. So you're getting the tidbit, tech videos. There's no release schedule. Subscribe to the channel, Socially Numb, and you can go ahead and get them as I update them. I'm also going to go ahead, and I had a Tumblr account, I think, for Leahy Media, where you can go ahead and stay up to date with all of our updates and with the Leahy Media Facebook page, which I created. So instead of having separate Facebook pages for each one, just follow Leahy Media on Twitter, and the same for anywhere else you want to follow. On Twitter, I switched the Socially Numb Twitter to Southbound Sports. I tweeted mostly sports anyway, concussion issues, stats, and things like that. So it's not that I didn't forget about Socially Numb. It's just the fact that I didn't have many followers at the time. And with good reason, I was losing a bunch because people probably listened to the podcast and then got back to the Twitter and saw that I was only talking sports. And I threw in some gaming stuff, but not really too much. And that was it. So that's the new direction we're going. It's going to be good. It's going to be a lot of fun. So a lot of new content is going to be produced. So keep an eye out for that. Keep everything up to date, your subscriptions, and everything with the site. Make sure you check the new sites out. If you're interested in sports, follow that, subscribe to that. Follow me on Twitter. It's Richie Leahy. The same with Facebook. Follow me, add me as a friend, whatever you do on there. Not really sure. I don't do too many updates. Join the Southbound Sports group. I have that as a group now instead of a page. And I thought that might go ahead and get more people involved and then hopefully get some voicemails and things going for the sports section. It might make things a little bit more interesting instead of just hearing me talk about topics. But we'll see what happens. We're just giving it a trial run, seeing which one's more popular. I'm not going to cut the least popular. I just want to start to get out some different ideas and try to evolve each of the sites. So stay up to date with those. The other tech thing I got for Christmas, the flash, that has been resolved. I went with the Nissan. I think that's how you pronounce it. i40. It worked out pretty good. Very, very good refresh rate for flashes that I've seen. Haven't tested too many with my Fuji. I also had great battery life. I haven't changed the batteries on it yet. I've used rechargeable batteries too, which is great. And I've had hundreds of shots of family over the holidays. So it's pretty much worked out. I don't know what happened with the Fuji lens. I did get that return in and the refund. I just don't understand. It was dead on arrival. Really ruined Christmas. The Nissan was a day late, so I missed one day of photos with the family. So very disappointed in Fuji. I relied on them. They let me down. But Nissan came through with a quality product, and I can't fault Fuji for the lens or for the camera because I love their lenses and the camera itself. So the flash, can't fault them for that. They could have invested more, try to get different things going into it, but you never know. With someone has a specialty in a different area, their other accessories don't really work through. And with that, I did get a macro extension lens. Wow. And what that means is I can put it on the base of the camera, add a lens to it, and then it makes each lens act as a macro. And a macro lens lets you take very close-up shots of an object. If you have a wide-angle lens, it works a little bit better. I don't have one, but I did test it out. Got some pretty cool results. I did like it. It makes the range of autofocus very, very small. So I had to end up using a tripod to find the sweet spot. Took some pictures of some jewelry. Those work out if you're trying to sell something or just to show off. You can go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Richie Leahy. I had a photography thing set up. Not really sure if I'm going to continue using that account for that or not. It all comes down to what I can figure out. But follow me on there. Keep subscriptions to the podcast. If you have any ideas or ways to make it better, let me know. Send me some feedback. I'm going to be updating the contact forms as I get more features of the site rolled out. So look for that. Follow me on Twitter, Richie Leahy. Hit me up there. That's where I'm going to be posting updates to the podcast and to the site. Once I get everything rolling, those will be launched, so you can check those out. I'm not sure on the length of the podcast. I'm thinking it's going to end up being more along the lines of 40 to 50 minutes. An hour pushes me over for SoundCloud. So for SoundCloud, I don't pay for it. If someone wants to donate for me to pay for a subscription, feel free. But I don't know too many people that actually listen. It seems like a lot of bots. And with that, it seems like kind of like Instagram to me, where some people might add ads or pay ads to get a bunch of followers, but the listeners aren't really there. I feel like most people are going to listen on the built-in podcast app, either on iTunes or on Google Play or through an actual radio app like Stitcher. I could be wrong, so if you listen on SoundCloud and you want that feature, let me know. Send me a comment or tweet at me. I'm not really sure, because it seems like everyone that adds me, some people message me on there and it just seems very botty, like a bot is sending me the message. But check me out on those. I'll be pushing more and more of that stuff out as everything gets set up here in the new year. The idea is to have these videos up and running smoothly and consistently around the time of the Super Bowl. That's probably when the new sports show will start. So I might podcast a little bit about sports in between that time. I might do some just test runs and get some type of feed up for the podcast. But if you have any ideas, let me know. Reach out. This might have been a pretty bit boring podcast, a little bit different than the other ones, more of a somber note, as I just talked about expansion and a good start to the new year. So check those out, and thank you for listening. You've been listening to Socially Numb with Richie Leahy.